So good morning. We're going to talk about sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the space. I would do a lot of work on Capitol Hill. If you're not aware, we've got a new administration coming in, well, newish, I guess, kind of regenerated administration coming in. And I was doing some consulting up with a bunch of folks that are up on the Hill writing the laws that we're going to have to deal with about cybersecurity. And in the hallway, I heard a couple of the staffers talking about, and I'm quoting here, that they were sick and tired of hearing about cybersecurity because they don't see why it matters. Now that's a giant problem. If the people that are literally writing the legislation and the requirements that we're gonna have to deal with as practitioners are fed up with understanding what's going on with cyber, there's a real issue. Obviously, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's been peddled by the market has not resonated. So there's a requirement to kind of look at this as a bigger geopolitical sort of side of things, like why is cyber warfare as important as it is? And I think really what we see is that we've kind of reached the zenith of that there are 5 horsemen of the apocalypse. You'll understand what I'm getting into here in a minute, but we're at a stage where if we don't get this right now, it doesn't look good for us in the future. Cybersecurity is national security requirement. It's not just something that we can kind of try at and write more rules and requirements about. If we don't get it right, the horsemen are going to get here faster, and that's a bad place for us to be. If you've got kids, I've got 4 of them. If anybody wants one, let me know. I'll gladly give you 3. But if you've got kids that are going to be doing things in this space, that are going to be running this country in the very near future, we need to give them the best shot that they can have at being the superpower. Currently, we're not doing that. I did write a book on cyber warfare. I won't say it's the book, but I actually did write a book on cyber warfare. So if you want to go look at that, please do. The whole point of putting this up there, my daughter told me this is kind of the lamest flex in history. But if you actually do have an interest in cyber warfare, it's actually a pretty solid book. And a lot of what I'm talking about here is referenced in that particular book. Another book that you should read if you haven't read, has anyone ever read this book on unrestricted warfare? Can't see because of the lights, got 1 or 2. Very interesting book. This was written by 2 colonels in the Chinese PLA. And I'll also reference this. When I'm talking about China in this context, I'm talking about the PLA and the Politburo. I'm not talking about the Chinese people. There's a difference there. The last time I gave this speech, a lady who's from China came up and said, "You don't mean China, you mean the PLA and the Politburo." So just know that. These 2 cats were actually doing what we would typically call in the US, their postgraduate school to get ready to be generals. They were working on this in 1999. This was before all the bad stuff happened with September 11th, and etc. These 2 folks are now generals in the PLA. They are way up there. They are the ones setting policy, priority, guidance for the Chinese government. What's interesting is their whole premise back in '99 was to say, let's take the gloves off. China has been way too restricted in the way that we engage in warfare and conflict, and we've lost. The only way that we can do things differently is to go rogue. Unrestricted warfare was what they were talking about. Now remember, this is 1999. In 1999, they literally talked about, wouldn't it be crazy for the US if someone blew up the World Trade Center? Wouldn't that throw things off? Wouldn't that cause the United States to engage in a conflict that they couldn't win? Afghanistan, because no one ever wins in Afghanistan. Hannibal couldn't do it, the Russians couldn't do it, we couldn't do it. They knew back in '99 that if bin Laden was able to do something, he could engage the United States, the global superpower, in conflict that would mire us in warfare, which would basically bankrupt the military-industrial complex. And these cats were writing about it in '99. They run organizations inside of the PLA now. They were playing 3D chess while we were figuring out what the checkerboard looked like. If you haven't read this, go read it. It has been translated directly from the original Chinese. There's some crazy things when you get into this, nuances of the language that our people don't even understand, which is why we are currently not at the level we should be to engage in this conflict space. North Korea, just to give you an idea of how good cyber warfare can be for organizations globally, North Korea is a country that is so poor financially because they've been sanctioned to death that they cannot feed their people. There are people in North Korea that eat grass because they can't grow food, and that grass is fertilized with human waste. However, they have managed to build a world-leading nuclear weapons program, and they continue to build and engage in conflict and continue to flex. They just launched a new missile a couple of weeks ago. Point being, cyber warfare is where they have engaged to grow that capability. They literally could not have funded building those weapons if they were not doing things in cryptocurrency and hacking through China to engage and grow that capability. Anyone here whose parents, myself included, my mom got hacked twice in the same day, thank you very much, Mom, who's been hacked in that cryptocurrency scam, we should have our names plastered on the side of the missile that comes out of North Korea next time it launches, because we have funded that program. This is where things begin to level out globally for organizations. I like to put this one up here too, because one, I think it's a hilarious picture, but two, anyone thinking that the bots are going to take over the planet, I just asked Sable Diffusion to create me a picture of Kim Jong-un riding a nuclear weapon. For some reason, he has two hats on. I don't know. But this is what we're actually dealing with, is that they are able to ride the wave of cryptocurrency and cyber warfare and leveraging China as their front operation because of the fact that this is where things get leveled out. Again, those generals that were running stuff back in '99 and are now taking care of things in the PLA and Politburo at the national level, they're allowing this to occur. They see North Korea as a rogue state, which they can use to engage in conflict, and they just sit back and go, we don't really know what's happening, it's not us. Our military, and I'm retired Navy, and I do a lot of work on Capitol Hill, our military is kind of trying to figure out what's going on the chessboard. However, we're not able to do that well because in reality, we're looking at a 4-year cycle. That's what we're lucky to get. You're really lucky if you get a 7-year cycle with 2 administrations back to back. But we are doing great if we can get 4 years. How many people think that national political strategy actually gets put in place in 4 years or less? It doesn't happen. Our military is not configured to actually deal with the chessboard. This is all we can kind of do, is make nasty faces at the Chinese and the North Koreans and say, you shouldn't be doing things you're doing, and we sanction them and they go, thank you very much, and go on and do it anyway. We'll talk about more stuff that proves this as well. There has only been 2 times in modern history, in all of history actually, where warfare was categorically leveled and every person on the planet was made a combatant if you want to be. One was the invention of gunpowder. That's part of the original formula from China for the invention of gunpowder. If you think about what happened with warfare and conflict prior to gunpowder, it was pretty much who was stronger, who had the bigger sticks, and who could lob the heavier thing over the walls that would basically win the war. This comes along, anyone that can pack enough gunpowder into something and shoot a projectile out of it, they are now able to engage in conflict. And they can do it at a scale which is going to change the face of the world forever. The second time that this has occurred is when cyber actually became a thing. If you're familiar with the Vault 7 leaks and the stuff that was leaked from the NSA, that was the equivalent of a very small tactical nuclear weapon being placed at the doorstep of every human on the planet with access to the internet and saying, please don't use this for malicious purposes. The moment that that occurred, we started to see an escalation in ransomware, we started to see an escalation in compromise, hacking, etc. This is the only time in history that we have been able to do this at this scale, and it's going to continue to get worse if we don't get ahead of it now. I promise as I go through this, you're gonna be sitting there thinking like, this is probably the most depressing speech I've ever been at. At the end, I'm gonna give you something that's gonna make you feel better about it. But somebody's gotta talk about the reality of what's going on here. If the people on Capitol Hill who are writing our policies don't care about cyber, the rest of us are categorically screwed. We've got to get the point across. There are 4 horsemen, and again, this is more evidence that the bots are not going to take on the planet or take over the planet, because I tried to get it to spell famine, and it came up with pestilence. I don't know what pestilence is, but okay, cool. We are dealing with a problem globally with famine, if you're not aware of this, and you'll see how this plays into cyber as well. Food prices are actually going up. If you go to the grocery store, even if you're not in the US, if you go to the grocery store anywhere, you will notice you get less for your money. stuff costs more. It's just the nature of how things change. It's the nature of evolution. That is not good for organizations and countries where they are not first world. In the US, we get kind of pissed off if Twinkies cost an extra buck or two. In other places, they don't have food to feed their families. When you don't have food and water, you will engage in whatever type of action you can to combat that threat, and you will likely use cyber now as the ultimate equalizer. Wages globally are actually taking a bit of a dump too. People are not making as much money globally as they used to. If you ever want to feel baller, look up the research on what the global annual income is for folks. Like if you take all the countries of the world and figure out what an annual salary is for folks, and then you compare your salary in the US to theirs, globally, it's about 14,000 US a year. And it's been going down. So if you make more than 14 grand a year, you're balling. Like you should have one of those Dave Chappelle things with the diamonds and the T-Rexes and whatever. But the point is, food price costs more, wages are going down, cyber is still there. If you're an enemy actor or you're someone that needs to feed your family and get some money, where are you going to go? Hunger continues to grow as well. This is at the national level. When countries are backed into a corner, they have to find some way. People want to stay in power. And typically in countries where they don't have an election process and they don't have democracy, when someone comes into power, you're starting to see this in sub-Saharan Africa, you're starting to see this in Latin America, you're starting to see this in other areas of the world. The people in power want to stay in power, their people are hungry, wages are going down. They will spin up capabilities to engage in conflicts so that they can stay in power. The way that they do that now, because it is the equalizer, is cyber warfare and cyber conflict. Attribution is also not good in cyber. The odds of us arresting anyone for doing something extremely malicious in cyber are pretty close to zero. Drinking water globally is also becoming an issue. Statistically speaking, about 80% of the world does not have access to clean drinking water on demand. There was an article published recently about Mexico City, where millions of people live. They are running out of water. They literally were going to the toilet to get water because they didn't have it coming out of the tap. If you've ever seen people that have run out of food and water, food you can deal with a little bit. Water, you run out of water for 2 or 3 days, you are talking about armed conflict and engagement, burn the world down type stuff. We are seeing this currently. It is going to back organizations into a corner, and they're going to have to do something about it. If you happen to live in one of these areas where it's orange, we are going to face water shortages. In the US, we are going to face water shortages in the near future. Last time I did this, I was talking about the reality of things that are impacting us and climate change, and I'm from Texas, like I'm as redneck as they come. Some guy was like, no, there's no such thing as climate change, it ain't real. In reality, it's happening. Like you just can't deal with the fact that it's coming. Climate change is occurring, it's occurred throughout history. It is going to impact the way that we access resources. At the national level, this causes folks to do things differently. Again, we in the US are going to have issues with drinking water in the very near future. Like I said, I'm from Texas. I've been watching my folks farm for the last 20 years. Every year, it's less water, it's less water, it's less water. If you live in one of those areas that's red, I would advise you to start looking at getting a well or figuring out how you can collect rainwater for the long term, because you're going to start seeing it become a resource that's going to be missing. Climate change has happened throughout history. Doesn't matter what somebody argues, doesn't matter if you think it was man-made, etc. This is an ice core sample that goes back about 800,000 years. Every time you see one of those little white lines in there, that's a climate change over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. Does it mean that man made that happen back when man didn't exist? No, but it means that it has occurred, it means that it will occur again, and it means that we had better be prepared for it, because it's going to cause national level impacts. And again, cybersecurity, cyber warfare is the ultimate equalizer. If you're running out of food and water and you're dealing with climate change and you're in power, you are going to engage in conflict via cyber so that you can stay in power and keep the people in your country hopefully fed and safe and secure. But it is the ultimate equalizer. As temperatures continue to rise, people will argue about this as well, but it just is what it is. It doesn't look good for us in the future. I don't think we're going to hit the climate accord stuff that we're talking about. And again, this goes back to the points on China and the PLA, because guess what? China signs all those agreements. The PLA signs all those agreements and says, yes, we're going to move off of coal fire and we're going to move towards solar power. Last year, China fired up 300 additional coal plants. So they'll say they're going to do it, then they don't do it, and they do the opposite because it's good for them and they get to stay in power. But really, they're not concerned about it because what are you going to do? Oh, I'm sorry, send me a fine, sanction me, so what? Big deal, life goes on. As long as Xi and his folks are still running things, who cares? And again, you can see that it's going to continue to grow. This is every time that they've actually started basically circumventing the requirements we put in place. Every one of those red dots that I put there is when there was a new law that came out globally that said, hey, dial back on coal-fired plants. And you can see that China just goes, yes, and does the exact opposite. Moving forward from that, let's talk about pestilence. When I talk about pestilence, I think we've got some issues that we should deal with because this is going to affect how we engage in conflict in the very near future. The requirements are you need enough people to keep the planet going. We are not generating enough human beings to replenish the people that are getting old and dying off. In some countries, it is a substantial demographic collapse that will occur in about the next 10 to 15 years. China is one that is going to happen to. Russia is one that's going to happen to. In the US, actually, we are not generating enough people to continue to grow the US at the rates which we were. You need about 2 people per family to be generated so that you can continue to grow the population and it sustains itself. In the US, we're at about 1.4. I'm okay with this because I've got dumb kids. I don't know if they need to contribute to the gene pool, but it just is what it is. Korea is going down exponentially as well. In North Korea, the numbers are even worse. They've run out of food, they've run out of water, they're trying to get things where they need to go, but you've got this ruling class of rich elites that are not dealing with everyone out in the countryside. They're down to like 0.4 people per family. Korea used to be the people generating factory in the world. Now they are not. If you're running out of people, resources, water, food, guess what? You do things to continue to stay in power, you engage in conflict. China is collapsing as well. If you're unfamiliar with what happened in China back in the 70s, they had this one-child thing they thought was great for overpopulation. You can do that for a little bit and the numbers kind of level out, but when you do it for like 30 or 40 years and it's a law, it doesn't work well. And then you go, oh crap, we need more people. 2016 says, never mind, we can have 2 kids per family. Guess what happened in 2020? We had that whole COVID thing. And who were the primary people that were affected by COVID? It was very young infants and very old people. You lose a lot of the young infants, they do not live to become old people. It is bad for population. You see a demographic collapse that is coming. Statistically speaking, even in the developed countries, we are not doing well in taking care of diseases that we should have cured that shouldn't affect us so that we don't have this population issue. Globally speaking, we're still dealing with basic problems that shouldn't be the problems that they are. Even in this room right now, 1 in 15 Americans will die from cardiovascular disease. And we can't crack the code on how not to have this issue face our population. Cancer is still number 2. Neonatal disorders, it's that stuff that we should have taken care of decades ago is still plaguing the population. And this is in first world countries. If you can imagine how bad this is in places where they don't have health care, or they don't have the access to resources, it gets really bad really fast. And guess what? As people get older, a mild cardiovascular problem becomes a categorical cardiovascular problem. This is all stuff that we should have cured, but in truth, we've built industries and capabilities that don't want to necessarily cure the disease, they want to treat the disease. That's not conspiracy theory stuff, that's just the reality of what goes on. There's a reason why pharma makes a lot of money. War is where this all leads to. I actually really like that graphic. I think it's pretty cool. But that is where we're going to go. And why are we going to engage in war? Well, it's because of money. War is the ultimate growth engine for capital in the space. If you think about the US, people talk about devaluation. I hate to break it to you, but devaluation since money was actually put in place in the US is way worse than what you've been told. Your dollar's worth about 4 cents of what it was back when it first came into practice. Since we abandoned the gold standard, it has fallen off. In other nations, it's just as bad or worse. China's economy, because of the things that happened in COVID, caused a collapse. It's not bounding back the way that they would like it to. China, additionally, the CCP, the Politburo, the PLA, They also have this issue with a faith-based credit system. If you know the right people inside of the upper echelons, inside of the PLA, you can go, I have a great idea. We should build this giant megacity. People will move to it, I promise, and the government will help subsidize it, and they'll build it, and then no one lives there. And the Chinese government sits on top of $2 trillion worth of negative debt because of all these megacities that they built that no one lives in. Additionally, like I said, they're facing demographic collapse, they're facing financial ruin. They've got to do something. And it's not just one place. Even the mega rich were not able to move into the places that they bought because of the COVID crisis and those things. And if you've never heard about this particular one in Forest City, which is actually outside of Malaysia, China, the PLA had the great idea of let's do the same thing in Malaysia. That's a city that's supposed to house about 3 million people. It houses 10,000. And again, China is sitting on top of all this negative debt, negative equity, bad things are going to happen. Where else would they engage? GDP is crashing. The same thing is happening in Russia. Russia's running out of so many people now because of the conflict with Ukraine. They just asked North Korea to send them 50,000 troops. They are letting people out of mental institutions to go fight the war on the front line in the Ukraine because they don't have enough humans. The deal is if you survive and you come back, you get 400 rubles every month for life. If you don't survive and come back, then sucks for you, I guess. The Russian economy is going through the floor. And we're going to see a retraction of what the US does globally. If you follow what's going on with conflict and the way that we engage in war globally, eventually the US does what we call a retraction. We did this, we grew, we did globalization, we were everywhere before World War I. We retracted post-World War I. We grew. We retracted post-World War II. Now we're at a stage where we will retract. When you retract the US, which is the global superpower, guess what? The big bad guy is no longer on the stage. Everyone engages in more conflict. More conflict globally causes more worse things. And if you don't believe that money is actually tied to the way that we engage in conflict, there's your proof. Every time the US needs some generation of revenue, needs to grow the GDP, we find a way to engage in conflict. It's just the nature of what works. China does the same thing. Even if you go back all the way to the 1600s, anytime China needs to grow, they will find somewhere to engage in conflict. War is good for business. If you're a nation where you need to grow, you engage in conflict so that you can keep in power and so that you can gain resources and those things. Even if you lose, statistically speaking, over time, your nation will do better because it's just good for business. Think of how many jobs are created when there's actually conflict. And lastly, that brings us to cyber. Cybercrime is going to continue to get worse. I would argue that cyber is the actual fifth horseman of the apocalypse. It's going to continue to grow. This is outpacing what we are currently doing as far as cybersecurity market innovation. If the cybercrime market is growing at 15 to 17% year over year, and our market is growing at 7 to 8%, mathematically speaking, they're beating us by 2 to 1. Doesn't put us in a very good place. This also means that we're probably not solving the right problems. There's 5,000 vendors at RSA every year. There ain't 1,000 problems in cyber you gotta fix. If we don't get this right, cyber is the bridge between espionage, bad things, and kinetic conflicts. Don't engage now and start doing something to change the way things are going. It gets really, really bad really, really fast. Not trying to be theatrical here, but the reality of it is, if we don't engage and we don't start to fix the problems, especially the things that we can take care of, we will see conflict come to our shores via cyber means. You're already seeing it. Look at what happened with nation-state level attacks last year. We lost about 80 Americans due to ransomware attacks in hospitals. If you had a Russian Azarov plane fly over the US and troops jumped out and took over a hospital and killed 80 people, you think we'd be okay with that? No, that would be an act of war. But because it's cyber, we go, well, that's weird. It's a bunch of technology stuff. It's ransomware, et cetera, et cetera. If we don't get it right, death is the last horseman coming. This should not be this easy. I did this just at home to sort of show folks just how easy it is to engage in cyber operational capabilities. I literally said, well, water is a critical infrastructure. Hospitals are critical infrastructure. How hard would it be for me to find something in the US that could possibly be targeted? And there it was. I did this watching football on a Saturday afternoon. If I can do this at home, Think of what a nation state can do when they have all that capability, they have the need, the drive, and they've got those other horsemen, famine, war, and pestilence coming behind them. If they don't do something, they're stuck in a bad place. This is how you level it out. Cyber warfare is kinetic conflict. If you're not familiar with what happened with Natanz, we basically figured out a way to hack those cats to change things up, and we blew up their nuclear centrifuges. Did it stop Iran? No, but it set them back by quite a while. If you've never seen the video at the bottom of the diesel engine that's been blown up using cyber to basically overspeed the generator, this is where we're going with this stuff. But again, the reason we're doing this is because it is the ultimate equalizer. I don't even have to put assets in country. I don't have to throw soldiers out of a plane. I don't have to do spying. I don't have to do anything. As long as I can get to that IP address, I can modify things and change things at the national level. Cyber warfare is kinetic conflict. If you're thinking any other way, you're categorically wrong. The good thing, after all that bad stuff, is that all of us in this room can actually join the fight and begin to take back the adversary's power position. And it's not that hard. Like I said earlier, there's 5,000 vendors in cybersecurity. I would argue that's like 4,996 more than we need. In truth, what we should be doing is taking care of very simple stuff. I went and did the research and cobbled together because I don't necessarily buy that there's all the truth in the marketing. The truth of it is, if you're trying to solve an 80% problem, you solve for identity. Whether that's human, non-human, hybrid, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to solve an 80% problem in cyber, and you want to gain capability and you want to get back on the good guy side of this thing, even at the national level, you take care of identity. It's always awesome to me when companies have published free software that someone can use to do this. If you're not doing these things today, you are waiting to see which horseman shows up at your door. The truth of the matter is, if we get it right and we engage currently and we do this now with smart technology, smart approaches, and a national strategy that makes sense, we collectively become the army that is going to combat the space. If you don't leave low-hanging fruit out there, if you don't leave the adversaries an easy way to cause compromise, you can literally engage in cyber conflict with the PLA and take back the power position. It's not that crazy complicated. If 80% of the problem originates with users, access, identity management, those things, why would you focus on other stuff first? Yes, it's super sexy and cool to buy the newest shebang AI-powered muckety-muck whatever from whoever's peddling stuff at RSA. In truth, you start where the problem lies and where the adversary causes compromise, and you begin to take the fight to them. So the last thing I'll leave you with is if you want to do right, if you want to engage in this stuff in the right way and you want to stay ahead of horsemen, 4, 5, 6, whatever horsemen happen to show up, get in there now and begin to do things so that you can change the game. You only have two options in a warfare space. You either engage and you stay ahead of the threat, or you wait and hope. Hope in cyber is not a strategy. Thank you.
Go ahead and do some Q&A.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any questions? I have one question for you. Is you sort of touched on the nature of the conflict with respect to industrial control. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about sort of SCADA and that aspect of cyber warfare.
Yeah, so that's become one of the areas of low-hanging fruit. My wife is a nurse. She works at a hospital. It's always amazing to me when you go into healthcare facilities and you look at the wireless systems and the stuff that's talking to the network, and it's usually woefully misconfigured. Factories are even worse. The funny thing about OT, IoT, ICS is those systems are relatively binary in nature. A thermostat should do one or two things. A robot should do a couple of things. Anything outside the bounds of that is abnormal and should cause a response. So I disagree with people that say that it's very hard to solve the problem around OT, IoT, ICS, but the reality of it is you basically have to decide to choose that you might knock something over. The truth of the matter is some of those systems are old, they're outdated, there's different stuff that's cobbled away in the back that's doing something that still makes money, but it's not an excuse not to fix the problem because you don't think that you're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. They're going to come for that capability. They're going to find it. It just is what happens. And rely on the government, any administration, to set up the guidelines and requirements that we should play and practice with at OT and IT and ICS Cyber. Just look it up, go try and actually find a clearly defined document from the federal government that says this is what you should do. It doesn't exist. It's on us to do this stuff.
So questions, please? Ron.
So hi, the current conflicts going on in Ukraine and Israel, do you see more or less cyber activity than you would have expected?
So Ukraine is really interesting because they've proven that drones are basically the change that's coming for kinetic conflict in the very near future. I mean, you've got Ukraine lobbing drones into Moscow, you've got Moscow lobbing drones. There's actually two groups within the Ukrainian army that are specifically set up to do nothing other than take Mavic drones and drop grenades on guys. So that's basically a cyber sort of version of what's going on there. And then you saw the conflict begin to engage. Anytime Russia is going to start doing something, they step up the types of attacks on infrastructure to get ready for the conflict coming. I think the one that stands out most in the Israeli conflict is the stuff that went down with the pagers, because number one, that was the most amazing sort of thing that's ever been done in the history of espionage, in my opinion. But it's a cyber warfare, electromagnetic warfare type of conflict. And it proved that if you spend enough time, plot, plan, scheme, and use all those logistical systems, you can cause kinetic impact. So, you know, the days of us saying that you can't kinetically impact an organization via cyber, those are over. Ask all the guys that had their pagers blow up if they believe we can do it kinetically.
So this is more of an opinion question, but it's just based off the slides of what you've been speaking to. Given North Korea and China and Russia as economic indicators of going, in a very negative direction, how long do you think it might be before we have what I like to think of as less isolated incidents and more widespread targeting of the infrastructure for like water and electric and things of that nature, since you refer to that as an equalizer?
I think you're already starting to see that to some degree. There's a lot more poking and prodding going on. And I mean, if you follow the historical sort of complexes that happen here, you poke, you prod, you find out where things are, you begin to install, you set up your back doors, etc. Huawei did a good job of that. I think personally that we're going to see conflict emerge sometime between now and 2030, maybe 2033. That's going to be more direct line of this stuff. The moment that it decides to cross the Taiwan Strait and do anything against Taiwan, all bets are off. You can do whatever you want against Ukraine. You can do Israel, which is all unfortunate. It's wrong in my opinion. However, when you're talking about warfare and business and the impact that it has to the United States, you mess with our semiconductors, we're going to come after you. So if you see anything about people moving across the Taiwan Strait, buckle up, because that's when it's about to get real nasty real fast.
Okay, any other questions?
Don't you think that it should be more on country level, like government, to focus on these cybersecurity issues that we're facing today more than individuals? Because on individuals level, like, it's going to take too much time to achieve those goals.
So 1,000% I agree with you that our national level controls should be in place. If you go look at the people that we've elected, there's 400 plus of them. Do you know how many people at the Capitol Hill level actually have degrees in computer science? Anybody want to guess? It's 2, right? We have 400 plus lawyers up there and 2 cybersecurity people that actually know what the heck is going on, or not even cybersecurity, just relatively familiar with computer science people, 398 others that make other decisions. So yes, I would love it if the US would engage in what we need to have take place there, and we're doing some of that to a degree with the establishment of a zero trust program office in the DoD, and they've allocated a bunch of money to it, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. That's why I think leaving it that last slide of it's incumbent upon all of us, especially small and mid-sized business owners, to begin to do things. It begins to make change. If we have all this low-hanging fruit going on out there, that's where the bad guys are going to go. They'll work their way towards national level infrastructure. And statistically speaking, like historically speaking, if you look at what's gone on recently, it hasn't been the mega companies that have been breached because they suck at security. They've kind of learned from it. They've had decades of getting their ass kicked, to be perfectly frank. Where we're at now is folks go through vendors, contractors, third parties, cloud infrastructure, easy low-hanging fruit, and they work their way through there. Because man, once I get admin privileges, it's game over. So yes, I agree. I wish, I go to Capitol Hill probably once a month and just jump up and down like an angry toddler trying to get people to do cybersecurity stuff. But the truth of the matter is, if we're relying on those folks to put things in place that will actually change the game, it's not going to play out well for us. Anybody else?
All right, any more questions? I've actually got one more for you, Chase, if you don't mind.
One up here too.
Oh, there's one up here, I didn't see it. You had your hand up? Okay, good.
What do you feel is going to have to happen for there to be massive, massive change in, like, is there going to have to be a 9/11, digital 9/11 version of, like, you go to any manufacturing plant, they're running, heck, there's one not too far from my house, it's an ethanol plant. I have friends that work over there, I think they still have Windows 2000 servers supporting there because they have these, older Allen Bradley PLCs that control all of this, making ethanol and all this. Is there going to have to be some massive catastrophic event to finally get some visibility to government to either incentivize businesses to get off this stuff? Because this is just glaring.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I look back to what happened pre 9/11. Knew that we were having targeting going on. The CIA was reporting on it. We said that folks are doing stuff in airplanes. Like, all the indicators were there, and nobody talked, and everything didn't work, and thousands of Americans lost their lives. Unfortunately, that's just kind of what has to happen. We had, like I said, we had no doubts about it. About 100 Americans died last year because hospitals were unable to provide care because of ransomware attacks that came from maybe North Korea, maybe Russia, maybe China. The fact that we're not doing anything about it other than just going, oh, shucks, we should fine them for HIPAA violations, shows what's actually going on. So it makes me very sad as a patriot, as a retired military guy, to know that that's what has to happen. But I think until something like that does, we won't move there. I mean, we have all this bureaucracy set up. We don't have enough action.
So I got one more question for you, which is, I would say most of us here are probably in the commercial sector, not in the government or federal sector. Given the information that you've presented today, how can we take that to management and increase the urgency to do more in the cybersecurity sphere?
So the truth of the matter is, and there's been studies that have published this, if your organization can tell your customers, clients, and partners how you actually do cyber, you do better in business. I think it's about 55% of people are willing to do more business with you because you can say how you do better in cyber. Just like when car companies used to talk about how great their airbags and brakes were, people bought more of those cars because they felt safer. It's the same thing in the commercial space around cyber. So what I would encourage you to do is, while this sounds very government-y, and it is, the truth of the matter is all of us in this space, commercial and otherwise, are part of the larger cyber infrastructure. Talk to your leadership and say, we can do more better, we can do more business if we actually engage in the right sort of cyber practices. And if nothing else, if your business wants to stay viable and you don't want to deal with the downtime that will occur based on compromises and breaches, do better in cyber. It just is that simple. If you've never been through a massive breach or you've never been through a fail operation or ransomware, trust me, it gets really miserable really fast and you lose a lot of revenue and a lot of business. And the recovery alone is enough to make you not want to do it. So the truth of the matter is, you're in this space whether you like it or not. I tell people all the time, you're actively engaged in a cyber conflict zone. You're going to have to play by the rules that are set by these organizations. You either do it or you don't, and sit there like this and hope it doesn't happen.
Great. Thanks a lot.